When you hear ethics in public health, your mind probably jumps to like a giant, dusty rule book, right? But what if we looked at it in a totally different way? What if we saw it not as a set of rules, but as a promise, a really powerful promise from a whole profession to every single one of us? So let's get into it and figure out what that promise actually looks like when the rubber hits the road.
Okay, so before we can really grasp this promise, we've got to talk about the end game. What's the ultimate goal here? And it's so much bigger than just, preventing diseases. It's all about this idea of human flourishing. And that's not just about not being sick. It's about creating a world where people actually have the chance to reach their full potential, to live these really rich, capable lives. And that idea of flourishing, well, that's where the mission of public health really clicks into place. Their whole job, really, is to build the conditions for that to happen. We're talking about the systems, the community support, the environment around us, all the things that give everyone, and that's the key word here, everyone, a fair shot at a good life. It's a team effort, a huge system-wide thing. But here's the million-dollar question, right? How do you make sure you're actually doing this work ethically, especially when you're facing some seriously tough choices? I mean, these decisions can affect thousands, even millions of people. So how do public health folks make sure they're keeping that promise when things get complicated?
Well, that brings us right to the heart of it, the Public Health Code of Ethics. And like we said, this isn't some internal memo. It's a public declaration. It's their promise to society.
I love this way of putting it. The code is like the collective conscience of a profession made visible. Think about that. It's like they're putting their values right out there for everyone to see. And that's huge because it means we can hold them accountable. It gives all of us a benchmark to say, hey, are you living up to your own standards? It's all about making sure they're truly working for us.
And here's a really crucial point. This code isn't a weapon. It's not a disciplinary document designed to punish people. Its power doesn't come from enforcement. No, its real strength is in being a framework, a guide for reflection and making good decisions. It's a tool to help people think through the tough spots, especially when there's no easy, clear-cut answer.
Okay, so if it's a guide, what's it pointing to? What's its North Star? That's where the core values come in. You can think of them as the moral compass for everyone working in public health.
Right at the heart of this whole code, you've got 6 core values that really act as that moral compass. And it's super important to know, they aren't ranked. There's no number 1 or number 6. They're all equally vital. They're the points on the compass that help navigate the, let's be honest, often messy world of public health. So what are they? All right, the first 3. We've got professionalism and trust. That's basically earning the public's confidence by being competent, open, and honest. Then you have health and safety, which is, the bedrock, protecting the whole community from getting sick or hurt. And then there's health justice and equity. This one's huge. It's about fighting to make sure every single person has a fair shot at being healthy.
And for the next 3, we've got interdependence and solidarity. That's the idea that we're all connected, right? My health depends on your health and the whole community's health. We're in it together. Then, human rights and civil liberties. This is about respecting individual freedom and dignity, even when we're working toward a goal for the greater good. And last but not least, inclusivity and engagement. This means making sure that the people who are actually affected by a decision have a real say in making it. Nothing about us without us. So, these all sound great, right? Of course they do. But, and this is a big but, what happens when these values start pulling in opposite directions? Because in the real world, they often do. Sometimes protecting one means you might be stepping on another. And that is the core challenge of public health ethics.
Let's take a classic example that really brings this to life. Think about an outbreak. To promote public health and safety, you might need things like contact tracing or even quarantines. But those actions can run right up against human rights and civil liberties, a person's right to privacy and to make their own choices. See the problem? There's no simple black and white answer. It's a true ethical dilemma.
So how do you even begin to untangle a knot like that? Well, the code doesn't just present the dilemma and walk away. It gives practitioners a framework for analysis, basically a series of critical questions to help them think it through carefully. This framework is built around 8 critical questions, and let's look at the first 4. First up, permissibility. Is this action just fundamentally wrong on some level, no matter what good it might do? Second, respect. Are we treating people with dignity? Third is reciprocity, which is a big one. It means, have we done anything to help offset the burden we're placing on people? Like, if you ask someone to quarantine, are you also providing them with groceries and support? And finally, effectiveness. Is there any good reason to believe this will actually achieve the goal? Then we get to the next four: responsible use of resources. Public health doesn't have unlimited money or time, so is this the best way to use what we've got? Then proportionality. Do the benefits actually outweigh the cost and the burdens? This is a balancing act. Then accountability and transparency. Can we stand up in public and justify this decision openly and honestly? And finally, public participation. Have the people who will be affected had a chance to weigh in? And it's so important to remember, this isn't a checklist you just tick off. It's a framework for a really deep, thoughtful conversation. All right, enough with the theory. We've got the values, we've got the questions. Let's see how this whole thing actually plays out in the real world.
Okay, picture this. There's a salmonella outbreak, and all signs point to a specific local restaurant. Immediately, you have a clash of values. You have the public's right to know and be safe versus the very real possibility of destroying a small business and the livelihoods of its employees. So using the framework, you'd start asking those key questions. What's a proportional response? Do we have to shut them down completely? Or is there a less drastic way to protect the public? What about reciprocity? How can we support the business and its workers who are being burdened by this investigation? And how do we handle transparency? How do we inform the public to keep them safe and maintain their trust, but without causing a citywide panic? That right there, that's the code in action.
And that really brings us to a key takeaway. This whole process, this ethical thinking, it's not a one and done kind of thing. It's a constant conversation. This quote really nails it. Identifying and cultivating ethical best practices is a reflective and dynamic endeavor. In other words, public health ethics isn't set in stone. It has to be this living, breathing practice of constantly thinking, learning, and changing as the world changes. It's a commitment to always trying to get it right. And that brings us right back to where we started, that promise. What the code makes so clear is that upholding this promise isn't just on the shoulders of public health professionals. It absolutely requires all of us to be involved, to be engaged. So I'll leave you with this final thought. How can we, as members of our communities, work with public health to make sure that this incredible promise of human flourishing becomes a reality for every single person?